Good to get started? All right, do you want to go ahead to the next slide, Michael? And we'll just do a quick overview of our schedule. Oh, sorry. Before we get to the schedule, who are we? So John and I are going to be running the day for the most part. If you don't know us, I'm Jocelyn Poirier. I'm the manager of Rugby Development at Rugby Ontario. John is my boss, our director of rugby operations. So he'll be floating around helping with our discussions today. For those of you joining virtually, just stay muted while you're listening. If you want to ask a question, raise your hand. We'll be able to hear you through here. So unmute yourself and you can speak, or you can use the chat and Michael will help you out. When you're in the breakout rooms virtually, cameras and mics on, please, so that you can talk to each other, get the full experience of being with each other. And just a heads up that we'll leave the Zoom open over lunch. So if you want to keep talking to each other, you're welcome to. If you want to leave and come back, that's great too. For us in person, washrooms are just out this door to the left. Snacks and beverages up here if you haven't found them or if you just came in. And then you've got paper and markers, you've got Post-its, you've got notebooks, you've got pencils. Anything you think of today, write it down. Okay, we're going to try and take as much as we can from today, pull it into our future sessions and our future planning. So anything you want to write it down, please. All right, next slide, we'll go to the schedule. So I'm going to do a little intro here. As you'll see, I'll go through some of our kind of sport development, self-assessment info that we had, that we've taken this fall so far leading up to this. And then we're going to identify some topics related to retention for the morning. We're going to go into some breakout rooms to discuss those, and then we'll come back as a full group for a discussion before we break for lunch at 1 o'clock. At 1:45, we'll come back and we'll do the same thing again from a growth perspective. All right, and then we've got a little end debrief, time for future steps, closing at the end. Next slide, Michael. Oh, I should say as well, this is our club development intern, Michael Haddad. Michael, give us a little wave. So he's been my go-to behind the scenes as well. So thank Michael if you see him today. We'll start with our land acknowledgement. So Rugby Ontario and our member clubs are situated on traditional Indigenous territories across the province. We're thankful to the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who continue to contribute to the strength of all communities across the province, and we're grateful to be visitors on their land. We're currently in Mississauga, which is the traditional territory and treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the First Credit Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat and Wyandot nations. This land was purchased in 1806 in the head of the lake purchase, also known as Treaty 14. And what I found interesting is it was 10 shillings was the price of that purchase. And Mississauga actually comes from the Ojibwa word meaning river of many mouths. All right, next slide, Michael. All right, so from that truth and reconciliation perspective, I actually pulled all of our 2023 registered members who either indicated Aboriginal descent or self-identified as Indigenous in their registration, and it was just 2%. So just some context for us going into today. And if you're looking to kind of take some truth and reconciliation into your own lives, back to your clubs, some actions you can take here. So learning about Indigenous long-term participant development, taking the anti-racism and coaching e-module, it's free, or hosting an Aboriginal coaching module workshop. All right, Michael. So we're talking about sport development today. Quick background, generally, we're just looking to get more people participating more in sport. So you can see, broke it down a little bit what that looks like, improving the quality of sport experiences, which Hope will talk a lot about today. Retaining, obviously one of our big themes, developing, transitioning, and recruiting new participants. Okay, there's development of sport and development through sport. We're talking a little bit more about development of sport today, but I feel like development through sport kind of goes hand in hand if we're doing them well. So rugby development, my role specifically, What do I see it as? Facilitate the creation of an environment conducive of rugby for all. Okay, so that's what we're talking about today. Anything that has to do with growth, development, protection, community clubs, school, children, youth, and adults, retention, transition, recruitment. That's what my portfolio looks like from a broad lens. Michael. So specifically, getting into why we're here, we sent out the self-assessment tool ahead of this, right? I think that launched back September 21st. Part of our commitment to support the club community through club development. Okay, this was inspired by work from the Empowering the Prairies club development series and tool that they have. We edited it, so added it, tailored it to make our to fit our needs a little bit more in our context in Ontario. There's 74 questions divided into 10 sections related to different areas of club development. Each question had 2 to 5 possible answers, ranked from 0 to 4, with 4 being the highest. So if you scored 4 on every one of the questions, that would be your 100% score. And 4 being that kind of gold standard. In some cases, not necessarily realistic for most of our clubs right now, but it's what we're aspiring to. So we had 14 submissions as of Monday. One more that came in partway through the week that I was able to incorporate a little bit of. It's a relatively small sample of our kind of 65 clubs, but it does include large and small clubs, urban and rural, full service and niche. So it gives us a snapshot of what we're looking at. And there is representation from each branch, but it's definitely TRU heavy. So the overall average score was 65%. The highest a club scored was 82, and the lowest 42. So you can see there's a spectrum there. These are the average scores for each of the sections. Again, we'll send you all this too. So if it's a little small, you'll get to look through all of this data later. But you can see the lowest areas there are Section 5, club assets, equipment, and commercial activity, and Section 6 on volunteer management. Okay, there were specific questions in each section that were lower than others, but that gives you kind of a general picture overall. Our club programming was the highest section. So we also had, the 10th section was qualitative questions. So when you finish the survey, we asked what are your 3 identified areas of strength for your club, what are 3 identified areas of need, and what are your next steps as a club. So this is the summary, kind of thematic summary of the areas of need that were identified by the 15 clubs who submitted it. All right, I won't go through each of them, but you can kind of see that, and we'll go through a little bit more of the questions afterwards. So development, retention, strategic planning, facilities, governance, financial, and recruiting. Okay, so when you look at the actual questions that scored the lowest, these next few slides are the sort of qualitative responses for the lowest scoring questions, if that makes sense. So board fulfills both governance and executive function in many cases, and in many cases does everything. Only a few clubs had differentiation between government, management, and operations, and in many cases, all 3 were performed by the same people. Typically, all roles are volunteers. A lot of you probably nodding your heads because you might have responded the same way, or maybe one of those was your response, right? Strategic planning. The board was the primary driver of strategic planning. In a few cases, members provided some input, significant input, and ratified the plan. In other cases, there's no strategic plan at all. Most clubs do have a formal debrief and evaluation process, but none of the clubs had all of the identified components of a strong debrief and evaluation process. All right, policy, risk management, and player welfare. This ties into the volunteer management. Most clubs had volunteers with at least the minimum qualifications and registration status required. Only a few had short-term plans in place for volunteer training and education. From club assets, equipment, and commercial activity, big one is that most clubs do not own their own field or clubhouse and cannot generate revenue from it. Okay, so that's where that area was very low. Most clubs were scoring a 1 or the lowest on those 2 questions. And most clubs do not participate in any other commercial activity. So again, almost all the clubs were a 1. There are a few clubs that were not a 1, and there are representatives of them in the room, so you can chat with them today. Next slide, Michael. Okay, volunteer management, as we saw, this was the lowest scoring section as a whole, so lots of pieces in this one that were low. Most clubs shoulder tap individuals they feel would be a good fit, rather than proactively recruiting, screening, or assigning based on fit. In many cases, job descriptions do exist, but are lacking some or most of the features of a strong job description. In many cases, there are no systems, documents, or processes in place for new volunteers. In others, they maybe got access to shared files, but there's no actual training. It would be minimal training for them in terms of onboarding. Many clubs had only informal or unwritten hierarchies and no performance management procedures. Others, informal or irregular performance management. And most clubs had no or only informal transition plans for volunteer roles. Club technical staff. In many cases, the club does not track whether Rugby Canada placement requirements are being met. However, in a few cases, they're encouraged or even required to complete additional training beyond the minimum standards. So there were some very high scoring clubs in this section, but for the most part, kind of on that minimum requirement. From inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, IDEA, many clubs consider IDEA principles when planning and or have some separate IDEA plans, but others don't consider it at all and are not actively working on any IDEA initiatives. And most clubs had only a few staff or leaders with non-sport specific IDEA related training or experience. Some promote IDEA related training opportunities to members and may have participated in programs or initiatives. Okay, so that's kind of our background overall from the survey. Retention specifically is what we're talking about this morning. So when we talk about retention, we're talking about getting participants to stay or come back regardless of their role. So we're not talking specifically about player retention, we're talking about member retention. All right, what's important in that? Positive quality experiences, perceived value, role transition, and recognition, appreciation, feeling valued. Like, do they actually want to come back? I think I'm gonna be almost on time here. Okay. So retention in Ontario rugby clubs. This was a late add-in. I was able to pull this data for us. We've been working on it. We don't have the club-specific and role-specific numbers yet, but we are working on going through all of that data in that way. For now, we looked at the entire province, not role-specific. From 2019, we skipped the pandemic year, so 2021, 2022, and 2023. We pulled these numbers in June. So this is not the full 2023 year, and you can see the numbers reflected there. There were 24,292 members who registered at least one of those 4 years, okay? 59% of them only registered one of the 4 years. And it continues to drop when you get to 4 or 4 years. Only 8% of our members from those 4 years actually registered all 4 years. So interestingly, a lot of our clubs actually responded that retention was something that we're doing really well at, and anecdotally, we tend to think we're doing pretty well at it. When we look at the numbers, which is why we're interested to break it down a little further into categories, roles, specific clubs, we can probably be doing a lot better, I think, right? So in 2022, we'd grown in numbers overall by 13%, but we'd only retained 41% from pre-pandemic. Right? 2022 to 2023, 45%, a little higher. More have registered since then, so we're hopefully a little closer to 50%, maybe more. But more than half of our participants aren't returning. So areas areas for us to look at from that club development self-assessment tool feedback we had. Transition of players to non-player roles, player transition between levels, right? So minor non-contact to contact, high school even to club junior or senior, junior to senior, post-secondary to senior, right? That sort of young senior to older senior. And then just development of our existing volunteer base, the creators of the quality sport experience that leads to retention, right? What are we doing to add value and appreciate those people, make them better at their jobs and keep them in their jobs so that we continue to have a positive experience? All right, Michael. Okay, to get us into our breakout rooms. I'm already behind time, so I apologize. But really quickly, at your tables, what are the most important topics for us to discuss today related to retention? So you're gonna pick our topics, and then we're gonna go and discuss them in small groups. So amongst your table, amongst yourself, you got 5 minutes, maybe less. I'm just gonna repeat the question. So the question is, with the retention, are we tracking the same people or were we looking at just overall? So the growth is the overall numbers. The retention numbers are specific to people. So we looked at like, did Tracy Jones register in 2019 and 2022 and 2023? Yeah, good question. Yes, did they shift to another club or did they stay within the system? That's part of the in-depth part that we're trying to get to, right? But at this point, we looked at the entire province. So if they shifted, it would still count as being retained. Yeah. Okay, back table that's still talking. Do you guys want to start sharing first? I'm going to hand one either way.
So one of the things we were talking about was the transition from U12 to U16 and found that U14 seems to be a forgotten age group because you're not part of a minis program yet or anymore, but you're not old enough to be part of the high school quote unquote seniors program. And that's where a lot of kids get lost. And that same with the transition from U18 to men's or women's is that the programs are good, but that kind of gap, if you're not in university or college programs to get to be in the men's or women's teams are kind of the two kind of crucial points where I think we're going. Like I'm part of Brantford. Our club has like 300 plus minis. It's insane. Our U14 team does not line up with how many U12s we have on either side. So that's a huge step.
Yeah, another thing we talked about was, are we communicating that holistic program? So from school to club to post-secondary back to club, are we effectively communicating to athletes what their Rugby for Life experience could look like? And then every time there's a transition, we seem to lose folks. And then the third thing we touched on briefly was just player burnout after a certain number of years and different types of programs running in parallel potentially with each other. Are players still enjoying it when they reach their early 20s?
So our first one is the same as the other groups. First one, we're talking about the transition phases, junior to senior, and the same age group, but we worded it more the non-contact to contact, but that same U12 to U14 area. Another one was about volunteer management and supports, talking about, that's a very overarching statement, but everything from exec, coaches, even parent team managers, things like that on how to attract them, keep them, job descriptions, that kind of thing. And then the last thing we were just talking about, what did I just say? Oh yeah, is the transitioning, trying to get people from where they just pay to play as a player and get them transitioning into where they're coming into dual role. So coaches, exec, whatever, so yeah.
Okay, thank you. Over here.
Taken note. I think we kind of had some similar stuff. The volunteer support, just talking about proper resources for coaches and volunteers, and proper support. For example, I mentioned our U12 team had 44 kids and one coach at the beginning of the season. So he felt completely overwhelmed, and obviously we tried to help him out, but we didn't, right at the beginning of the season, we didn't have enough coaches, and we didn't have anybody kind of trained. So it was like parent volunteers and people, but they were always kind of coming and going. So there was never a solid structure for them. So just one, being prepared, and two, just giving proper resources. And then return on investment. So why are kids coming to play rugby, especially at a young age when they don't even know what the sport is? So, you know, you go to soccer and they get a ball and a jersey and shorts and whatever, but why are we bringing them to rugby, and how are we making it fun and keeping it interesting? And then keeping interest and engagement and progression. I think that was a big thing we were just discussing was you were talking about repetition in U6, U8, U10, like they're learning the same things. It doesn't seem like they're learning different skills, so maybe they get bored. I think that was pretty much it for our group, right?
So we were looking at transitioning from players to coaches or volunteers or matched officials, just how else you can help the club and give back to the club. Our second was finding the why for retention, whether it's surveys or, you know, why we're not retaining those same people year over year, to try and get that fun factor, figure out what people want at that specific club. And then also our third one was, what can Rugby Ontario do to make volunteering lives easier at rugby clubs, whether it's coaching sessions, ONCA compliance, volunteer framework, things like that.
Okay. Zoom friends. We have someone who wants to share.
I
Oh,
can share.
going once?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Twice?
No.
Lee?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So one of the things we talked about was how different ways to motivate or incentivize retention from player to, you know, whether that be volunteer, coach, ref. And one of the other things we talked about is looking at ways potentially we can get more support from either Rugby Ontario or Rugby Canada for having more courses, so that way we can provide them with the training that's required to keep them.
Yeah. Anything else from our Zoom friends? Anyone who was in the other group, not with Leslie, who wants to share what you talked about?
Can anybody hear me? Steve Hall.
Yes. Thanks, Steve.
Hi. We came up with three things. One, creating a fun atmosphere. Two, higher level coaching across all age grades. And three, getting players involved, the senior players involved in coaching at the lower age grades.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. So our job now is to pick, in person, we're going to pick 4 of those topics, 1 per table. On Zoom, I think you're going to pick 2 for your 2 rooms. So what would we say are our top 2 most important topics from there? The non-contact or minor to junior? And junior to senior? Do those need to be separate topics? Transitions, age grade transitions. Okay, so that'll be 1 table. Let's say that'll be this table. That'll be 1 group on Zoom. What's our next important topic that you heard? Coaching development, coach volunteer development. Does that go together? Can we put that together? Is that too much? What do you think, John? John just got back from Ireland last night, so he'll cut him some slack.
Training and education comes under one, so we can put coaching and match officials together.
Okay, so we'll have a T&E table. I think there's also a volunteer, though, specific, whether that's transitioning from player to volunteer and volunteer development, or if those need to be separate things. Okay, so volunteers, developing volunteers, and transitioning into volunteer roles will be this table. And what's our fourth topic, do you think? Burnout? Reasons for attrition that we heard, yeah? Yeah, so why? How do we create that good experience? Why do they come back? Why do they leave? Okay. Progressive learning, yeah, how are we actually developing them throughout? So the quality experience and what's leading to it or maybe not leading to it will be our fourth topic. Okay, so Michael, if you can change the slide for us. You're gonna go to the topic that you want, but there's only so many of us, so we're gonna try and keep an even distribution. You've got a few minutes to chat amongst your group, and then 2 leaders from your group are gonna change tables so that you get input from everyone else in the room. So you'll all get to have input on all the topics, okay? Yeah, sorry. Zoom, there'll be 2, so you'll just have 2 people flip partway through. Okay, so you heard what the topics were? They're doing the first 2, which I think Michael has down. So age grade transitions and T&E. And they can maybe go T&E with volunteers as well on Zoom. Okay, so age grade transitions is 1. Training and education, so coach and match official development and recruitment, retention. Volunteer transition development, and why? Positive quality sport experience. What leads to it? What? Okay. We should be all back together now. Yeah, there we go. We got some people here. Okay, so all our groups hopefully are ready to share what they discussed. You're going to have about 3 minutes each. Okay, maybe we will start with our virtual rooms this time. Can we get a rep from a virtual room?
I can speak for our group. I think there were 2 different ones. So starting with the training and education, so I'll just go through some of the points we had. So in our group, we found that the clubs were covering the cost of both the ref and coach courses, which was beneficial, and that included them being sure to budget for it each year. We talked about potentially exploring the opportunity for grants to help cover those costs. I know that's something that the Toronto Rugby Union looked at this year and was successful in with the Canadian Tire Jumpstart funding. One other thing that we discussed was some of the lack of course availability, especially during the off season. Luckily, John talked about some solutions that might be coming for that. We found that mentors for coaching are very helpful. That's something that the match officials tend to have, and they get more, more regular training. And is that something that we can look to for the coaches as well? Volunteer hours were a really good selling point for getting younger kids involved in coaching, especially with rookie rugby. One of the things was, can we consider train the trainer for times when we are light on actual training sessions that are available? Is that something that we could potentially get more people trained by doing? And trying to help out the coaches and volunteers with things like gas if they are not paid an honorarium or a salary for their work. So that's what we had for training and education. I don't know if the other group wanted to add any.
Okay, so that was our training and education group virtually. maybe we'll come back to our training and education group in person here, and we'll let them build on that.
All right. So definitely good points, definitely some points that we had as well. One thing we were looking at was just the coordination of all the dates. So people can plan ahead, make sure these are out far enough that people can build schedules around with vacations and everything, so we're not scrambling at the last minute. Also to have preset dates and venues where it's not club dependent on getting 8 people out as a minimum. We know that there's going to be a venue at, or there's going to be a set date at somewhere, so we can send people there to make sure we have those minimum numbers, so not canceled last minute. We are also looking at doing some flow charts for what do you need to do to go through the program as a match official, or coach level 1 or coach level 2, just so everyone has everything right there in front of them, black and white. We also talked about removing financial burdens on the trainees, including the high school coaches. And then we were looking at the ongoing education part. So as a definition, we looked at education is providing knowledge to understand the general situations, which is the base education. And then training was a specific skills to produce like KPIs that we can track to. So how to develop good habits, or what good habits we should do to ingrain those in people, and then how to stop bad habits. But then it's taken offline from a in-classroom session to a real life session where we're looking at match officials in training, in quotes, that we can use at U12 and U14, where we're partnering a junior ref, junior match official with a more senior match official, so they get that ongoing mentorship or ongoing knowledge and reinforcement right at the time. So that's kind of what we had as well. So it's that ongoing training that I think we need to focus on as well.
Okay, thank you. So we'll come over here to volunteer retention, I think was our topic. And then we'll go back to Zoom for the age grade transition. And then we'll come back to you guys in person.
Yeah, so parent engagement is one of the things we focused on first for volunteer retention. Some of the ideas we discussed were having kind of parent parties or meetings, both informal and formal. So informal, more of a social gathering, get them more comfortable with the environment, and then formal, talking about kind of the plans for the season, how they can help, things like that. Coach's playbook to help with volunteer roles, so almost like an organizational checklist of things that need done, and so the coach can just kind of assign those duties or get help with that, whether it's washing of jerseys, things like that. Kind of learning pieces for parents, whether it's parent and kid games to get them involved both socially and to learn the game, whether it's touch games as well. On that piece, we also talked about programs such as Learn the Laws or Learn the Game programs, so that parents can learn positions, gameplay, terms and vocabulary, pretty high level things that you can hand out just to make parents feel more comfortable. As a group, demonstrating a high level of organization or professionalism and the image that we kind of put out as clubs. Parents have high expectations of other sports in that regard, and they probably have those of us as well. Sometimes we're shy to have direct communication or requests to parents of things that we need help with, so not shying away from that. We talked about how there's a lot of coaches who come in, coach their own kids through the age grades, and then exit. How do we keep them involved or give back in other ways? We talked about the kind of parent engagement, especially when it comes to the tackle piece, when players age into that. So learn a tackle program, so involving coaches, parents, and players. And then on the registration administrative side, make registration, whether it's through Sport Loma, whatever it is, easier for parents or members, and also linking systems of registration, email lists, attendance, things like that. And then lists of resources and best practices for coaches and parents to understand. We also talked about getting players into leadership roles such as coaching or other executive members and match officials. So things like player boards or leadership groups and teams, kind of developing those leadership skills. Focus on mentoring, encouraging, and leading other players to give back. Coach resource skills and guides, so skill and physical development, looking at competencies that we hope players to have through the age grades as they develop as players, looking at a long-term development kind of program. Streamlining administrative duties, again, kind of talking about Sport Lomo, the inputs with games, kind of rosters and game sheets. And then support and protection for match officials. Obviously, referee abuse is a big concern, so we're losing people to that. So how we can better support them. Ideas around reaching out to retiring or injured players to get into leadership roles. Creating shadowing or following opportunities for coaches, exec members, match officials, things to learn the roles. Same with match official development, having retiring match officials kind of giving back as assessors, whatever it might be, or coaches for officials. And then looking at helping with registration, educational costs, and support for coaches, match officials, exec members.
Lots of great stuff in there. There's more? Okay, so we'll go over to Zoom again, to our second Zoom group, which was age group transitions, right?
So I don't know if I was the one. I think I took notes for both sides, and I spoke on the teeny one first when I think my original group was the other one. So Steve or Karen, I don't know if you wanted to speak on the age grade retention. If not, I can read the notes that I took from that.
No,
one.
I think you're doing a great job on it, Leslie. I think you should both, you volunteered to take notes for both and are doing a fantastic job.
All right. So for us, we talked about some of the challenges that we have in the retention from the age groups of moving from the non-contact over to contact, as well as the drop-off that we often see at the senior players, whether that be, the senior players go off to school and play varsity rugby, and then we don't necessarily get them back. We lose them oftentimes due to jobs. I know for my club, a lot of them, we have people who are doing physical therapy for work and other tasks where they need, their hands and their body, so they're unable to continue playing the contact. But what we're trying to do in that sense is how do we then keep them within the club? So is it a volunteer role? For us, I know a lot participate in the touch program, which is helpful. From the junior girls program to senior women, we also often see a lack of retention there. One of the things that we talked about being good to do is involving some of the senior players and the older junior players as coaches with the younger age groups. So that way, as they progress through the ages, they are familiar with people within the group and they have that sense of belonging already. So it makes the jump to senior a little less scary. The challenge from losing players from the non-contact to contact, I know for us we struggled with that when the age grades changed from the U13 to U14. We just didn't have enough players, so now we had a gap in between for the U14. So that was the one team we weren't able to run this year. So we really struggled with keeping them engaged throughout without having that programming available. We really need to find out why they're leaving the sport. I know Jordan, or not Jordan, one of the other, the Caledon Cavaliers were talking about, how soccer is so popular and it has such higher costs to it. But they tend to keep players over the years, and we're just wondering, rugby is super affordable of a sport. You don't require a lot of equipment. So, why are we losing kids to other sports like soccer and hockey rather than keeping them within rugby? And I think it's important to offer opportunities to players to be involved in other ways with the club, such as reffing, coaching, or on the administrative side. Oh yeah, and Mike mentioned, so removing the ability to play down is a problem, and we definitely lose more players as a result. So that was one thing that I think both of our clubs struggled with is there are oftentimes in rugby, especially when you get to contact, obviously there are kids who might be at the proper height and weight, but they're inexperienced, especially when you get in that, U16 or U18, throwing someone in there that doesn't have those skills to be able to play up, but they're being denied the playing down simply because, of their height. That was one thing that we really faced a challenge with in retention as well. And I think that's it for us, unless anyone else had anything to add.
Okay, thank you. I can speak on the playing down piece. When we made the decision to remove playing down as opposed to remove playing up to ensure that we didn't have 4-year age banding, there were 8, I believe, players who played down the year previous that we were looking for. So 8 players is what we're looking at who would have lost that experience to play down. They still had the experience to play in their age grade. Over to you guys. I don't know
If
you
their age grade, if the age grade existed, of course.
Yes.
Oh, this works. Okay. Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking. All right, so we're again talking about the age grade transitions, and we said one of the biggest issues we talked about was touch to tackle, and trying to get people more comfortable with that because some of the kids and some of the parents are afraid of going into contact or afraid of contact, whereas other ones are motivated, and the reason they want to play rugby is because they want to get into contact. So how do we can get that in at a lower age grade, and not necessarily to actually be doing tackling, but to use crash pads and things like that, just so the kids get confident in going into tackle and touching other people and doing things and running drills that way. We also talked about the long-term development plan, which was something that we need to talk about, and setting plans at each age grade that actually linked into each one. That looked at the Rugby Canada variations and teaching the skills at each level and having a consistent plan that goes all the way through so that kids know where they're going to go to, and by the time they're at 18 they're playing that way. And also, especially on a club, making sure that it's consistent so that you don't have a coach at U14 teaching a totally different style of play that the coach at U16 wants to teach because the kid's totally confused and wants to give the game up. We're talking about some of the issues with the universities, and I'm not sure how we're going to solve that because a lot of the players go to university and don't come back, or are not allowed to come back, or are not allowed to play, and it's caused some issues. But I'm not sure that's sort of a Rugby Ontario dealing with the youth sports and people like that. What else we got here? Losing players. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
We were just talking about the U14 team, and it's sort of it's just in between, like you got your minors and then there's this disconnect between the U14s and then you have your U16 and 18s. So how do we, I'm sorry, I forget your name. You were talking about the U14s. Maybe you can touch on that a bit and how, what's that? I didn't write it all down. I just wrote U14. Anyways, but just how they play. Whereas like there's a system with U16 and 18s. You were saying how it almost felt like they were still stuck in this like festival style. And so you're doing like U6, U8, U10, U12, U14, and all this kind of, it's a long period of time to be in the same style of play. And then you switch to like U16, 18, which is tiered and full out rugby. Right.
Just one observation in our area, because it was very regional. There was a big discrepancy between the bigger clubs and the smaller clubs, and those smaller clubs were not having a particularly good experience for the first 7, 8, 9 weeks of U14. And you could see those kids getting discouraged because they weren't having effective training sessions. They didn't have enough kids to do that. Right. And then they go against bigger club who are more coordinated, can train together. And there was a lot of mismatches, which you could see wasn't a great experience for the kids. So,
yeah. I think the last point kind of we were talking about too was I know our club doesn't do year-round stuff. I come from Collingwood, so it's hockey and skiing. And I know our past president was sort of like, rugby's done, everybody else does ski racing and hockey, which I think is a kind of a poor observation because I definitely know my kids don't do that. So year-round training, I know some clubs do. We don't have access to an indoor dome. I know a few places do, which is fantastic, although costly, it sounds like. But if there's any way we can keep kids engaged in rugby year-round, I mean, it is a very, what was that? Yeah, school gyms, yeah. Yeah. Good luck. But I think that's one thing is that sense of community and keeping people in that community year round, not just, hey, it's May, June, July and see you later, but keeping people involved in the community of your club year round, whether it be in specifically training or community events, social events, all that kind of stuff as well. Drinking, yeah, partying. Yeah, I think that was pretty much it. Yeah.
All right, over to our last topic. So you guys can kind of wrap it all together for us, right? Quality experience brings it all together.
So that, yeah, our topic was quality experience. So why rugby? So why do people stay and why do people leave? So a lot of them kind of flipped on both sides, just from a different point of view. So the community feel and that support, it is that type of sport that like we can wreck each other on the field and then have a beer after. That's a great experience. That's also can be why people don't leave if they're not able to kind of get into that experience. They're not kind of accepted and brought into the club. People will often leave. The social aspect is a very big positive for why people stay, and then player development. There's lots of opportunities to develop, but that can also be inconsistent experience with different people. If you're part of a club that has those development opportunities and things like that, you tend to stay with rugby and grow with rugby. But as the last group just said, if your club doesn't have that ability to do other things and doesn't have a clear path to go from U8s to men's or women's in that direction, oftentimes those kids will fall off. As a negative of why people often leave is burnout, and I think that's seen in like the coaching and the reffing, is that we're going back to the same well too many times, not getting enough coaches, not getting enough refs spread out, so we're using the same players and the same people for too many tasks, and then they burn out. Another negative would be just representation of, do we have adequate representation of people in our community and men and women in different roles so that those people as they come up can see a path to get there. And then another one for a positive is that a lot of the people that tend to stay in the sport are people that are kind of like rugby bloodlines. So their families played, their fathers played, their parents played, and they'll play and their kids will play. And that's a great thing for why it keeps going. But then on the opposite side is being able to take those families that don't come from rugby bloodlines and getting them into the community and creating new rugby bloodlines so they continue in going forward. One thing that was brought up that was really good is kind of a whole piece to this is we almost need to get data from people that aren't in this room, because if we're in this room, we are rugby people. So knowing why we're leaving is kind of tricky because we're not, because we're here. So being able to find a way to talk to some of the newer people in the sport of why they stay and go. And then some of the positives that another group brought up was just encouraging really that total family experience. So one of the ladies mentioned that it used to be a family day, whether it was the men's game, the women's game, you were always out there with your kids, your family. It was a whole experience, and that made the sport and the club have a really good experience. So getting the younger kids out to the men's games, the women's games, seeing the sport, having the parents see, okay, you're watching flag rugby and it might be boring, but this is what we're working towards. This is the sport they're going to play. This is the fun, and that will help kind of bring that connection through the age groups and with the parents, because in the younger age grades, we're really winning the parents. It's great that the kids want to play, but you have to win the parents with organization and structure and fun, because they're what's going to keep the kids coming. So that was kind of the general.
Can I just ask, online and in here, how many of you have sat down with your 15, 16-year-olds, asked them why they keep playing, why they keep coming back? Is that it? Have we asked them about experience, though? Well, everybody's the same for me. we survey, we actually sit down and have a conversation. Because if I ask a 16-year-old to do a survey versus sitting them down in the middle of a practice session and ask them a question, it's a different answer I get. So how many of us have actually taken the time to sit and talk?
The results differ depending on if rugby is their main sport.
Oh, and I completely agree. Exit interviews, surveys, everything else is a necessity. But for me, when I look at, and I did this when I first moved over here and was working in soccer, I asked the recreational level, so not the competitive ones, because they're the nuts that want to hit. I wanted to ask the recreational, those that are there for the fun of it, that have nothing else to be doing or could do so many other things as we find with every other sports that we've got. So I sat down in the middle of one of their training sessions and asked them, why do you do this? What do you wish you could have done when you were 6, 7, 8 that would have helped you and your friends stay in the sport now? What is it we could have done? And they gave me the ideas. They gave me the ideas and what I did at the U7s and 8s. So how many times are we going in and asking them, or getting our nutters that want to hit, and going asking their friends, why did you stop? Or how can we make it better? Is it about the contact? I know my mother wanted me to stop doing it at 12 when the contact came into play. But is that the main problem? I didn't. Wish I did. Now I'm injured and can't do anything else, but.
Their friends, right? Oh, yeah, sorry. So yeah, my kids are always trying to recruit their friends, even their football player friends, to come play. And they're like, I don't want to get hurt. You play football. But it's all, I don't want to get hurt, or there's no way that I'm going to let my kid play rugby. You know, my mom won't let me or whatever. And that's a big thing that we've experienced. And also, the teenagers have a weird, odd obsession with the swag. Cool shirts, cool kit, they're all about it.
Sorry, I was just kind of like adding on to that. As far as like kids wanting to get out and trying to recruit their friends, I find that like as you know, born and raised Ontario rugby player, it's a social thing. Hockey is the cool thing. Football is the North American cool thing. Rugby is still growing in popularity around here, and so like you said, having those conversations with the younger age groups and why they like it, and that can help us into getting more buy-in, like you said, getting the parents to support it and seeing how good it is for their kid. It's not just a sport. It's not just getting your kid out to be active and to run around and do something. They can do any sport for that. But rugby is unique. I don't know your name, but you, this lady over here, Barb, she pointed out, and something that we all know, it's a unique sport. And I think that we need to educate people on the value that rugby as a whole can bring to you as a person, as to a community. Not just this is a sport that we need to grow, and that we need to develop the sport because business, because we like rugby. It's a community thing. It brings a lot of positive to everybody, and I think we just need education on that.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, it's the outreach awareness campaign about rugby and demystifying that it's a violent, brutal sport, that everyone gets injured and everyone gets a concussion. So parents are saying, oh, my kids play hockey and football, but no way will they ever play rugby. Yes, you look at the stats and you can prove that rugby is less violent or brutal or whatever the words they want to say, but I think it's a communication, as we always say, but like it needs to come, there needs to be a promotional campaign about how great rugby is and cut out that violent piece.
Funny you say that, because that is coming. Barb, we'll just go online and then come back to you, if that's okay. Maybe? Hello?
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry, hello.
Right.
You can hear me? Was that a yeah?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the one edge that we realized that we had over hockey for our first year last year was at age 12, at the U12 age group, because we learned for U12 in rugby, with it being intro to contact, in the hockey world, they don't start contact to U14. So the players that we were getting kind of was an encouragement for them to participate with rugby, because they were getting the extra edge contact 1 year early. Whereas where I find now with U14 and U14, I guess, with the hockey world, because we're caught in this kind of crossover between the bridge from minor development into junior development, I think that the U14s for rugby is kind of undervalued. Little Johnny that turns up to a hockey tournament gets a medal for going into the locker room and putting his jersey on. The guys for U14s turn up to, like it was mentioned early on, a festival style tournament where they just get a pat on the back for participating and saying, good job, it's development. And I think our engagement that we had with lots of the parents this year who came from the hockey world didn't understand that it was, thanks for coming, good job. And then there's U16s on the other side of the field getting a trophy for playing it just as well as the U14s did.
Okay. One of the things that we found, we were low in our flag area this year, and it's because they didn't want to travel, and that was parents. And so what happened was we struggled for the first time in years at that age group, and they would rather do community-based things. So for those of you, I'm from Toronto and the central area, and so we're getting kids, and we need to grow our game in in our communities, and that's how we're going to go. And that's why I look at, say, some of the clubs that, one, have a clubhouse, but two, have a smaller community, or you're a smaller city, is that you are a one club there, and so everyone goes, and which I'm kind of jealous about, because we have to manage our whole of the city. So we're trying to get kids out from Jane and Finch to come down to Eglinton and Leslie, and we can't do it because it takes kids an hour and a half on the TTC to get there. So that's our biggest thing.
Over to Tiff.
Maybe now? Okay. This is just kind of an idea, not really an experience question, but we talk a lot about, this transition from non-contact to contact. We're talking a lot about how to get the kids involved and keep them retained, throughout to be an adult. But when it comes to the adult senior leagues, we only have one option, and that is contact. And so if we want more adults in, they need that gap. How do we get into the non-contact option? We have no touch, we have no flag leagues to support that, right? Like she mentioned, numbers were down. I thought maybe you had like a club flag league, and then I realized you were talking about like kids. Flag is amazing, rugby development overall. There's this kind of social stigma with it around here that, oh, it's not contact, it's not cool, But I think that we really need to promote some flag rugby so that it's the non-violent side. What are the skills that we're developing? This is what rugby is, and then we progress to the contact. Like mixed abilities rugby, I think, is a great avenue for this. I know it's what our club is kind of using as a gap to be like, there's no limits on what your experience is. Come try mixed abilities rugby. You can learn, and then if you like it, you can transition into some senior contact rugby. But I know that's not what the intention of mixed rugby is really kind of for. It's part of it, but not, fully the message it's supposed to get. But I think that if we can promote different types of rugby, different avenues, starting not just at the junior levels, but at the senior as well, so that those juniors can see that, oh, I'm playing flag rugby as a kid. this is cool and fun and I can develop this. You know, my mom is doing flag rugby too. We can go out and we can like practice flag rugby together. You know, that holistic growth.
I just wanted to go back to the question of why they stay and why they leave. Our director of rugby comes from New Zealand, and he came with all the skills and all the pedigree that you could want in terms of building out what does a program look like and all of that technical stuff. But what he brought that was much more meaningful and impactful was the concept of connection and the importance of being part of something. And you don't just come to training to win games, you come to training to see your friends. And we've seen the growth in our programs, maybe not quantitatively in the way that people look at statistics, but in terms of when I walk on the pitch on a Monday and Wednesday night, I see joy, I see happiness, I see excitement, and I see the coaches that are fostering that concept of connection. You see their pods of kids doubling in size, and the ones that are a little less engaging, you see it diminishing. And I've seen over the years different coaches and different people we've had in specific positions, and I haven't seen the growth. And then I saw the shift from, I don't know, a growth mindset to a connection mindset, and it just changes why kids are there, because people in general want connection. They want to be part of something, and then that, of course, bleeds into the parents, because the parents want their kids in a safe space. And so it's a slower growth, but it's an important growth, and it makes everything we do more meaningful.
Rob, to finish us off before lunch here.
Got it. All right. Okay. Yeah, sorry. One thing that we haven't really touched upon is that like rugby exists within a very, very competitive sporting environment. We're not necessarily discussing how we make rugby competitive versus football, like as an attraction. We talk a lot about the myths that get spread. I think probably those myths are largely spread by other sports as to keep themselves competitive and retain their own kids. So, you know, one person touched on how we got a competitive advantage at the U12 age because we got the contact scenario. And I often wonder about flag. Like flag for me, I would ask myself, why would I play flag instead of basketball? Basketball's got a million opportunities, lots of local play, lots of that stuff. Flag's like, the only reason I play flag is because I'm going to learn to play contact. That's at least my opinion. If I was a parent with a kid and I was going to put him in a sport, flag for life wouldn't be it. It'd be basketball for life. It'd be flag to get to contact. So I think, I don't know, we just need to think about how we got to compete against other sports. If we want kids, we're going to grow, they got to come from other sports. And we got to think about that.
Yeah, I found it interesting. It's like part of my master's thesis was around retention and looking at the different age groups of kids as you're doing different sports. And so when you look at those younger age groups, it's all about the parents. Who gets kids in? Who keeps them in? It's parents. But then once we get to that, when we're talking about this age group of that retention group, it comes down to peers. The peers are the ones that are really going to keep them in there. So the friends and how to build that. And then once you get a little bit further on, it's about coaching. So how do we get them and where they're moving and what they're moving through and that player pathway that we're looking at. So we've got some great points that are here, but we're conscious of time. So in that way, we're going to wrap up this session. Joss?
Okay, so for those in Zoom, as I said, we'll leave it on, so you're welcome to continue your conversation there, or if you want to take a break, go get some food and come back. We're back at 1:45. For those of us in the room, our posters we're going to put up on the wall, so you're welcome to peruse, see what else was on other people's posters. Our food is here. Chit chat. Anything I'm missing? Use the washroom. We'll be back at 1:45. Okay, thank you. Okay, so as you guys get your desserts and get seated, I'll just start us with a little more feedback, some other kind of food for thought as we go into our afternoon of growth. So this is from our Build Belonging Project think tanks. What happened, we had 5 sessions led by our project manager and project assistants with the Build Belonging Project. So they're not rugby club people, not Rugby Ontario staff. They're external people who we brought in for this. The purpose of these sessions was to reflect on sort of the historical demographic of rugby in our unique communities, discuss IDA practices and awareness at their club, brainstorm IDA-focused initiatives and areas for improvement, and just network and collaborate with other clubs involved in the program, or in the project, sorry. So in total, 22 participants from 10 rugby clubs who were involved in the project participated in these think tanks. And they were a variety of roles, so player, coach, admin, board members, parents. We had full transcripts that were reviewed, and the researchers then identified some key themes. So Michael, if you want to change the slide, we'll go through them. So first topic they came up with was around barriers to rugby participation and attrition. So playing off of some of our discussions this morning, again, this was from a Build Belonging IDEA lens, but I think there's a lot of overlap, and it hopefully help inform as we go further into our discussions this afternoon. So the main themes you'll see there: cost and affordability, accessibility. Oh, I can't read that one. Something, culture and participation, yeah. Injuries, and then what's the last one? Oh, negative experiences, yeah. Can tell it's too small. There's a lot of content here, but these, again, you're going to get all these slides, so you'll be able to look through them a bit more in depth. Just wanted to give us a bit more context as we go through. Next one, Michael. So continuing our barriers, we have, I'm going to look at my sheet instead of that one. I'll read them out for you. We have structure, lack of representation, life transitions, skill and fitness disparity, and volunteer burnout. So those are the main themes that came out, and then you'll see the sub-themes as well. Again, a lot of overlap, hopefully you're noticing, between our conversations this morning and this, and then our conversations that we'll continue to have. So the next main topic or area they covered was strategies to increase rugby participation amongst underrepresented groups and sustaining newcomer involvement. That was increasing community engagement, establishing clubs as a community hub, enhancing media exposure, increasing presence in schools. All right, and continued on our next slide, raising the profile or awareness of rugby, increasing access and financial supports, increasing volunteerism, and rethinking structure. Sorry about that. Last one, club identified areas of improvement, areas for growth or improvement for us. Clarity in policies, procedures, and codes of conduct. Introducing mixed ability programming, growing programs and providing clarity about mixed ability rugby. Providing financial aid and raising awareness of it. Enhancing accessibility to and at practices. Community outreach and engagement. IDEA training, education, and awareness. Increasing diversity and representation in leadership roles specifically. Mentorship. Using an IDEA lens or perspective across social media platforms. Trans inclusion, safety, and support. And finding alternative roles for volunteers and non-players. So I'm not going to get too much into that. I can tell you that there are some pieces from there that are coming out in the continued Build Belonging Project legacy work that we're doing. But again, things for you to kind of ponder as we go into further into growth and our discussions this afternoon. Yeah.
It caught more than one of us by surprise, is going away from gendered divisions. That's question one. And question two is, how is this work being given back to the clubs? Because from what we've seen so far, it's like a stub on Wikipedia. Lots of good talk, but it hasn't come back to the clubs other than through this medium.
So your first question is, what's the question?
You say twice there, it says moving away from gendered divisions. Do you see reducing male, female, men, women divisions and going to single divisions? Is that what you mean?
No, so this is not feedback from us. This is feedback from the think tanks, from the
Understood, yeah.
clubs, right? So to me, that is offering like non-contact where you don't have to sign up as men's or women's, everyone is together.
Mhm.
So that's how I would take it as mixed gender or ungendered programming.
So mixed abilities and non-contact. Okay.
Yeah,
got it.
opportunities where you don't have to sign up.
That makes sense.
Men's or women's. And the other piece was, how is it coming back to the clubs?
Yes, because you say it comes from the clubs. It comes from representatives of the clubs. And right now, much of that, and I know because we've sent representation, it's not reappearing back in the clubs. Like this information is not going back to the clubs. And we're not saying like, here's a recommended policy on inclusion, or here's what's happening with trans. We're not following World Rugby, we're following Rugby Canada's approach to trans members and things like that.
Yeah, great point. So, part of it is coming into this series, right? Bringing it to more clubs, because we did have, I think there were 12 clubs that were involved at some point in the process, 10 that were involved throughout like the full process, and of those 10, there still were several who were involved, but in terms of having a polished initiative at the end, they're not there yet. So a lot of capacity issues, other struggles that kind of got in the way of them actually getting to an execution point. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, the other part, and this is kind of where we're coming back to, and one of the things came up with structure. So within Rugby Ontario structure, we're having to redo this to have a club focus. So we haven't had that. So this is where we've kind of had this audit over the last few months since I've been in there and looked at Jocelyn's role within rugby development and said, right, we have to focus on clubs. We haven't done that. So this is exactly where that kind of going back to clubs is Jocelyn. That's why we've started this, why we're having the club series, and what her focus will be as we're going forward.
Yeah, the other piece is that through the Build Belonging legacy, we're working right now on developing a committee, and the last piece of our funded Build Belonging project is a marketing campaign and a marketing toolkit. So we're looking at how can we take the lessons from the clubs who were involved in the project and provide that information to a club who says, you know what, we didn't have capacity before, or it wasn't a priority for us then, but we'd like to do something like that now. Here's what we've identified that clubs need, and sort of like step by step how you would go through it, or that sort of thing. So yes, we are trying to take all these pieces and then go back and say, clubs have identified that they don't have code of conduct. So can we provide a template, right, that you can then just edit or put your logo on? Yeah, sorry, bad example. In some cases, there were things like that that came up where they were like, oh, we need to have a policy on this. And we said, we actually do have a policy, but clubs don't know about that. So that comes to the education piece. Yeah, so good question. It's still in the works. Okay, what is growth? So generally, right, easy answer, attracting more or new participants. Specifically, we want to talk probably a little bit more today around the organization and capacity for growth. I think this is a big piece that's holding clubs back for growth, and probably from our retention piece a little bit as well. So we have people, places, programs, planning. We actually have the capacity to get any bigger than we are. Accessible programming and multiple entry points. So I think it was Tiff talking about sort of accessible programming, and I'm going to show you something on programming in a sec. And then who are you recruiting, right? Who are you actually trying to recruit? Is it, to Dave's point from earlier, like, are we preaching to the choir, the people who already know about rugby? How are we reaching those people who don't know about it yet? This is another piece where we're going with the Build Belonging marketing campaign, is trying to reach new populations, new groups, and sort of change the external view of rugby? And then are we actually reaching them? So hopefully this marketing piece will help with that, but from your own club standpoints, who are you trying to reach and are you actually getting the message to them? So this is back from the self-assessment tools. We asked what playing divisions you offered, where you offered programming. And this is what we got from 15 clubs. So you can see, I don't think there's a single one there that's actually a 15, right? Different clubs, as I said, different sizes in response. But the glaring missing pieces for me is exactly what Tiff was talking about. We don't have non-contact options or mixed ability options for the most part past U12. So if you want to stay involved in rugby and your parent won't let you do contact or you're a little afraid to try contact, maybe you need a gentle entry before getting to contact, we don't really have that in a lot of places. So there's other pieces we can take from that, but to me that's the biggest missing piece in that. Okay, growth areas. So this again comes back to what was identified from the self-assessment tools. We've got financial, governance, programs, strategic planning, recruitment, facilities. So I talked through all the questions this morning specifically. Hopefully you're seeing that reflected here as well. I won't spend too much time because I'm sure we'll have lots to discuss as we move forward, but you can look through that a little bit more. And now we get to pick our topics. So with all those thoughts swirling in your head, what are the most important topics for us to discuss today related to growth? Okay, so you got 5 minutes in your group, and then wrapping it up. Who wants to start? Okay, virtual, we're back.
Check, siblings, check.
Can they hear us?
Yeah, 1, 2. So we only have 2 alternative forms of the sport. So looking at touch leagues for all ages, other inclusive forms of the sport. And number 2, there might be multiple things coming out of this, but we just titled it marketing, which includes advertising, outreach, social media, community engagement, things like that, which might be sub things. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's pretty expensive.
Okay, over here, and then maybe we'll go around these ones, and then we'll go to virtual last.
So we had 2, maybe 2.5 kind of overarching ideas. One is finance. So like these players and people, coaches that are paying into it, what are they getting out of it, right? Cost and value. So as far as like growth is, can all of these kids, families afford to pay this? Do we have any, like you talked about in the build belonging suggestions, right? Finance is a big one. What can we offer them? You know, like high school students, can they work off their yearly fees or something, kind of those kind of agreements or offers? And then volunteering. Are there structures in place, succession plans? Like if you ask somebody to come volunteer, is there an outline, like a job description outline of the expectations and responsibilities that you're asking them to do? Is there direction on how those things are done? And that, like usually there's a champion that gets things done every year, these events. Is there a transition plan for when that person retires from the position for a new volunteer to step up? There's usually just walking in blind. So having that business view of policies and procedures and allowing for growth, you have the structure in place that allows everything to grow without chaos.
So we started talking about how do we attract non-rugby players or people from non-rugby families, or again, yeah, those non-rugby positions, and recruiting from all areas. So more of just our reach, right? Some of us work in or have clubs in multiple clubs within a same area, right? So make sure that we're reaching everyone. And looking at recruiting in elementary schools and high schools, and how do we get the word out that rugby is a thing in our community. We talked about creating maybe that community visibility, so things like Santa Claus parades, just doing good in our community, maybe highway cleanup. How do we create our visibility, and then just awareness about the sport and club.
So we were definitely along the same lines. How do we reach non-traditional populations? And then what does our communication and presentation to them and to others look like? Overcoming safety concerns, different things like that. And then also promoting the connection and belonging that's available at the club. So kind of that. And then also, what happens if this works? What are our capacity, or how do we scale up? You know, now we've got 400 new members this year. It's still a problem. It's a different side of a problem, but we have to have scaling up, or we have to figure out how we're going to scale up.
Yeah, got to have capacity for growth before we can grow. All right, virtual groups.
I can mention what Mike and Jordan were talking about. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're good.
Yeah. So I think there was some concern around like growth by getting into the schools, but how do you get into schools if you don't have a teacher in your club at those schools? So it seems to works well when you've got a teacher there that's in your club, but if you don't, it seems to be a locked access. And then the other concern was around, if you want to have additional programming in flag, like non-contact, then you need double the resources because you're going to have maybe this, doubling up age groups that some are contact, some are not. So that was a concern as well.
Okay, and our second group. So anyone else who wants to share anything from virtual then before we come back here?
The one thing that it just kind of reminded me, and it's about the marketing, but it was getting the city involved. Because I hear, when the Barbs are talking about it, and the kids are getting awards from the Barbs Sports Hall of Fames. They get subsidized for their winter dome through the city. So if the city buys in, and it's a big thing. I know Toronto is not going to, but some of the others might.
Having led a soccer club in Toronto for 7 years, I completely agree with you, Barb. They ain't doing nothing. Okay, so we've got 4 topics that I've kind of put together based on those. So looking at the non-traditional sides of the sport. So we'll go with this table here for that one. Looking at the value proposition. We're going to look at, I know you said finance and everything else, but for me, the big word out of that was the value side from a growth side. Looking at awareness and visibility, so taking in some of that marketing side, some of the schools, the community, municipality, and then looking at capacity. So looking at volunteers and capacity. Can we move online so we can get the 2 groups? One is looking at the capacity, and the second one looking at that value with the non-traditional side. So Michael, into 2 groups. Thank you.
Okay, so you've got 12 minutes with your group before you rotate. And I will say, if you want to be in different groups than you have been, this is the time to mix yourselves up if you want to. Otherwise, you got 12 minutes. Go. Okay, I think we're all here. Who wants to start? Here comes John. Virtual group, I know you guys we're back together, so you've had a lot of time to consolidate thoughts. Do you wanna start with them? Who would like to share?
John was taking notes.
Okay, we can hear someone. You got 3 minutes. Give us your Coles notes. Hello?
Well, I'll speak then because they trapped me into doing this, Karen and Jordan. Thank you very much. We talked about We talked about capacity, and two things came up is if we can start registrations earlier, we can plan better because capacity requires field space bookings, coaches, refs, team managers, everything. So the earlier we can know our registration numbers, the better we can plan for that. John was helpful enough to suggest it's going to start in December in 2024, which will help. One of the challenges, if the groups are too large in an age group, how can you field 2 or 3 teams? And does Rugby Ontario have adequate competitions for a U16 club to run 3 teams within an age group? And then we felt that off-season activity is key for everybody. If you can engage players in off-season activities, whether in a gym or a dome, you're going to get those, you'll retain those players. You'll have a better idea of your registrations for the next year, and you'll be able to plan your capacity better.
So, anything else to add from virtual? Okay, we'll come to capacity in-house.
Yeah, we definitely looked at infrastructure and volunteers as well. So same infrastructure that you guys were looking at. But then we also added, as an example, ATs. We struggled with them all year. So that's a feed into our club that we can't totally control, but we need them. And then what happens when we grow bigger? Our club identity. What happens when we're at a size, whether it's number, geography, or vision of the club, whether we want to be a performance-driven club or a social-driven club. That kind of plays into it and what we can do to keep together or split along those lines. If we're larger, what we're seeing right now, club silos, where we have definitely juniors versus seniors. And they're 2 parts of the same club, but they don't really mix. Like was said earlier, level of competition when we're running two or multiple teams at any one level, we just want to make sure that we have meaningful competition for everyone, because you don't want to join a club, play on a seconds team, and then realize you're never going to play anyone because there's no other team, there's no other club with a seconds team in that league. Plan tournaments for extra players might solve that, or other playing options might solve that. Yeah, and then delegation of activities to prevent burnout might help scaling up, but that's all we got.
So we had awareness and visibility. And so we talked about just increasing our community involvement. So just outside of the rugby community, putting our rugby club in the community. We talked about swag and branding. Kids love wearing anything branded, right? And we should use our club members as walking billboards, right? Maybe branding looks like providing schools with branded balls, putting rugby balls in the hands of students. We talked about club events within our club, so maybe a try rugby day, bringing a friend, community barbecues if your facility allows that. We talked about kind of increasing social media and email presence, or reaching those who aren't on social media. So maybe creating or looking at media writing workshops. How do we provide the media with an already written article that they can just post? Maybe talking about search engine optimization and how do we make sure that our club is the first one that you see when you type in rugby in your city. And maybe that's something that we need support from for those smaller clubs who maybe don't have tech hands on their membership. We talked about building relationships within the high schools and elementary schools in particular. So just increasing that presence. A lot of kids don't know about rugby in elementary school. I know I didn't have any education on rugby in elementary school. And then also building relationships with other sports. So rather than seeing soccer or football or lacrosse as an enemy, how do we partner with them and build both sports up?
Awesome. Zoom room friends, do you guys have anything you want to add on awareness and visibility? Any thoughts to build on? Going once? Going twice? All right, next topic. We'll come to you after this one as well.
All right, our topic was kind of value and growth, and just really talking about what does somebody get out of their membership for rugby. You know, it's more than just the insurance, the uniforms, the field cost, which is like what people pay to play other sports. You're actually joining a rugby community, where you see a lot of times people from outside of Canada or the area, they come in and they're like, oh, how did you hear about us? Like, oh, I looked up rugby club in the area, and so I came out here. And they just feel that, you know, the feedback is, I love the community. It's so welcoming. It's so inclusive. It's everything that they want, especially when they're new and they're trying to find their foothold in the community, and just trying to build that, you know, to go from the park from private to club, where everyone's invited, everyone's encouraged to come out and be a part of it. Really market the benefits of being involved in the club and give them that breakdown. And we talk about ways to generate revenue from other pockets. You know, I feel sometimes gone are the days where you expect your senior players to really have that disposable income to put money over the bar or spend it. We're not seeing that revenue anymore. So we've got to diversify, kind of go beyond that, just relying on players' dues, and really look towards like summer camps is a big thing that we do at some of the clubs that really generate some money. Clinics that we have out there to do kind of specialized, you know, scrum half clinics, kicking clinics, things like that, where people can pay, and especially if the parents are able to afford that and they want to involve their kids, as well as facility rentals that we've done a lot. We rent out our facility, we rent out our club, kind of getting people from the community to start using that area to really help generate some revenue. Other things, as mentioned before, was partnering with other sport groups, community organizations. I know Fergus, they did a camp where it was like rugby camp in the morning, tennis camp in the afternoon. We've had some feedback that hockey clubs are looking to reach out to rugby, and they want to do some contact clinics because they don't do contact till later on. So with our crash pads and kind of the tackle shields, it takes away that worry about contact, but they can at least still focus on proper technique, getting a strong core, and kind of driving through. That can be related to other sports, similar to like wrestling and things like that. Winter Touch League, co-ed, or even just like you say, if you don't have the facility, it's easy to run, even if you can run touch rugby in a gym. You know, you don't really need anything besides the gymnasium and a rugby ball, and you can be able to do that. And then you can really start kind of getting other non-club members involved and kind of spreading the love of the game, I guess, with rugby. Yes. So just saying other rugby events or sports at the club. So some people do music festivals where they have other people just showcasing what the rugby community is about. Another club had pickleball where they ran that, and they ran the bar and kind of ran the barbecue. We did one earlier this year with McMaster. It was motion ball. So it's like where they play a bunch of different sports, and it's a bit of a mixed ability feel. So they play different sports, and you'll have one or two participants that are mixed ability athletes, and they're kind of mixed in and playing with everyone else. So when they asked to rent at our facility, they didn't have rugby on there as one of their things. So we asked them, like, if you involve rugby, you know, I'll basically waive the field rental costs, and we'll just set up a barbecue and a beer tent and everything like that. So it went over really well, and it was a good thing to kind of provide to the community. And I think it's going to be an annual event that we run every year now.
Awesome. Barb, do you want to quickly add thoughts on that?
One of the things I haven't heard is networking. Like I know my husband and I met through rugby. His business partner met through rugby. People that they deal with are a lot of the people that they deal with are through rugby. And when you hear someone plays rugby, it's different than, oh, I play hockey. Oh yeah, you play hockey, nice. But hey, rugby, where did you play? Oh, you played there. You know, it's so networking is huge, and we're trying to teach the kids that and the parents that it can be a job later on. It could be an interview later on. It could be a mentor later on. And through that is the values about the reason why I play rugby and I stayed in the community is that we teach respect. We teach all these things that, you know, my parents on the sideline, with the odd few, we go, no, you have to you have to abide by our our laws, and these are our values in rugby and why rugby is a better community. So that's one thing that we have to get out there when we go to do these big advertising or big whatever we do. That should be first and foremost, is that it's our, I don't know what the right word, the ethics of the culture of the game.
Awesome. That's very much what our marketing campaign is looking at, is that values-based approach. I just want to clarify quickly before we go to the virtual group, because we've talked a little bit, we've mentioned mixed ability and kind of clarifying that. When you said there were some mixed ability athletes, you mean there were some athletes with disability, is that correct? Yeah. Just because I know there's this perception of mixed ability is for people with disabilities, but mixed ability is mixed by nature, so all of us can play mixed ability rugby. It's for people with and without disabilities, old, young, anything. So just to clarify. Virtual, anything to add on that topic before we move on? Actually, so yeah, keep this. Nothing from virtual? Going once, going twice? Okay.
Okay, this is on. So a lot of these have been mentioned already, so that's good. Again, one of the non-traditional growth opportunities that we started with obviously was the touch, but we've talked about that all day. Another opportunity is along the lines of the socials and events to bring in people from outside of the rugby community, but also game day activations, just make it a little bit more exciting on game days, whether it's just with community partners coming in to put displays up for whatever they're promoting, or just make the game, like when the seniors are playing, make it a bit more of an event to keep people at the clubs longer, those of us with clubhouses, but also to make it more of an outing for the whole family to come and have fun. So that, and then career development opportunities, so using the job postings as a way of marketing that the club is growing. So if you're looking for internships or you're looking to provide opportunities for people that might want to get into a career in sport to come and like shadow coaches or see how the club is run, or those kinds of things are all good opportunities for marketing and to reach audiences that otherwise wouldn't know that rugby exists. Affiliate programs are great. So a lot easier done if you sell things on your website, whether they're outside of Sport Lomo, so whether it's merch or camps or extra extra like off-season training camps, those kinds of things can be linked up with a plugin or an app to manage an affiliate thing. So if you refer somebody to the club or to make a purchase, then you get a kickback, whether it's paid out in swag or in credits toward whatever you spend with the club later. Those opportunities are great. Loyalty programs to keep people coming back to the club for various reasons, even like beyond just practice days, but coming back to watch the senior men play, whatever, or women. Off-season opportunities to get people together. So like other than rugby, so if it's the co-ed hockey or basketball or volleyball or something in the off-season, where you can bring in athletes from other sports to play on your teams, but then like, oh yeah, by the way, we all know each other because of rugby, so come and check out our sport. And then other networking opportunities and exposure opportunities through the city. So community events and trade shows, potentially community kind of sponsorable events or places where we can represent rugby as a whole, kind of dispel some myths about rugby, answer questions of concerned moms or what have you. And then looking to ways to grow within the education stream. So whether it's providing education, exposure, opportunity to schools and teachers to learn about it, really great opportunity to figure out how we can maybe get into those teacher colleges to teach them about rugby at that level so that they can introduce the sport in gym classes in a bit more of an organic way. And then for each of the clubs to find within their local community the sports alliances to get connected in with the awards, like Coach of the Year awards and those sorts of things, to really start to promote that. I know that we do that at a Rugby Ontario level, but also we could do it within our own communities as well. And also some clubs are successfully running programs through the Parks and Rec in their communities. So I'm not sure if that works for all clubs, but it's a really great promotional and awareness opportunity. And I'm just wondering if there's opportunity for us to even advertise in those without running programs through. I'm not sure how that works, but it was a good thing to table. And I think everything else that we have on this list has been mentioned through other, sponsorships and community partners. So when you have a sponsor, either it's a jersey sponsor or it's a club sponsor or any kind of sponsor, giving them the materials so that they can promote on their social feeds that they're a sponsor, because then they can be a proud sponsor of community sport, and then the club can reach their audiences as well. I think that's it.
Awesome. I'll throw it back to the Zoom group. Anything you want to add or elaborate, questions based on that summary from non-traditional growth?
Knowing how much some of the people online talk every time, I'm shocked at the silence.
Okay, so we'll open it up to anyone then, just sort of open discussion, and we can pull in our retention talk from this morning as well and growth, but starting to think about what are the themes you're noticing, what are the most important things you're taking out of this, what are areas maybe you have questions on still or you want to elaborate on still, what are the actions you're going to take? So we're just open discussion, so raise your hand, either virtual or here. We'll hand you a mic.
It's karaoke now. Here we go. I think that one of the things that sort of everything we're talking about here is we should be looking more outwards, out of the community rather than inwards and dealing with our own little issues and problems. I think we have to look at putting our stake in the ground. This is where we want to work, and this is how we want to work, and how we want to get people to involved, and how we want to try and grow the sport and amongst ourselves. And of course, not to say that we don't have to look inward, because this morning the results of that survey pretty much tell us that all of us have a lot of work to do as far as getting our processes and value statements and terms of reference and all these sort of things that we need to do to organize ourselves a little bit better, so that we're repeating stuff intelligently and doing stuff intelligently rather than just brute forcing it every time we have a problem. But I think that we then can look outwards to try and get people to come in.
And so in saying this, I hope it doesn't ruffle too many feathers. But I think that this is excellent, and we have a lot of great ideas, and everybody's all on the same. It's really reassuring to know that all clubs are kind of in the same boat with the same problems. I think we need like a workshop or training or something on how to make action plans on how to do these things. Now that we're identifying this, this is really inspiring and motivating day for me personally, that we all identify the same problems and we're all working together to figure out how we can solve those problems. I think now we need to learn how can we support each other in taking those steps to do the actions, because I know it can be scary reaching outwards. We're familiar with the people within our club. We're familiar of the rugby people within our community, and we know they all want to help. How do we reach outwards, and how do we support and get the confidence to do that?
So we luckily are planning a few more installments of this series throughout the new year, but we haven't picked any specific dates or topics yet, and we wanted that to be informed from today. So if there's something that you're like, we need an action planning workshop session, we can do that. right? Or if there's resources specifically that you need, we're trying to basically take the self-assessment tool, and for any question that your club was low on or a section that you were low on, to be able to say, here's a resource to support you in that area. We don't have that full list, but we do have some pretty good things starting to come into place. So yeah, if there's specific areas that you know you want support in, you know it would be really great to have a workshop on or a webinar on, give us that feedback right now. Strategic planning and action planning, yes. Yeah, I think that came out of our self-assessment pieces as well.
If we look at Anka as an example, given it's one of the big ones for this year of October 18th, 2024, it must be done by. Part of that is strat planning. Part of that is operational planning, putting those things in place that must be done. So in that way, for us, it's a simple thing of saying, right, we'll find experts that are, this is their thing, so as to come in and actually have a conversation. It may be something that somebody already has a good strat plan in their club that will lead a bit of the conversation. So this is where we're trying to use this rather than me saying, well, you need these topics. The idea was to do it the other way around of what topics do you need? So that's exactly why we're going to get to that way.
We also, the self-assessment tool, we've talked a lot about identifying the low scoring areas, but we're also looking at the high scoring areas. So we can say, hey, Peterborough was actually the only club that scored a 4 on this question. So why don't we have them share what they're doing, right?
I'm wondering, we seem to skirt around the issue of the essence of rugby, which is like an aggressive, physical, strength-based power game. And we always want to try to find the safe way around it, the untouched version, or we don't seem to want to take on that image. We don't seem to want to promote that image. It's courage. We're working hard. We're building our bodies. We're able to do this. Our kids aren't allowed to do anything with strength. Is this something that we need to just, are we accepting of this? I struggle with how we tend to skirt around the essence of rugby and don't own it and don't be proud of it.
I'm sure you heard that, but yeah, there's definitely an empowerment piece for the women. I don't know if anybody wants an actual microphone to speak to that.
Yeah, I would agree that we need to look at promoting rugby as a contact sport, but it's a great contact sport that isn't just about contact, and that it can be something that can be part of your life that you can drop in, drop out, come back to. I've been involved in rugby since 1986, and that's been a player, coach, referee, full-time administrator, part-time administrator, club president, and I've just, it's given me so much in my life, how I met my husband. We have friends all around the world, and so I promote these values and this kind of like family lifestyle to the young girls that I coach. That it can be part of your life. It can be whatever you make it, and we need to promote that kind of difference and get over that because it's contact, it doesn't mean that it has to be scary. It doesn't have to be like that violent kind of thing.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think sort of back to what you were saying there, part of the problem is, and it's part of our own making, we tend to envision rugby players as those cartoon guys we see on the t-shirts with the cauliflower ears and the half scrum cap and with a pint of beer in the hand and sweaty uniforms. And we can yeah. Yeah. No, but what I'm getting at is I know I resemble that remark, but the point is we look at that and we kind of promote that, and we should be maybe more promoting it more like it's athletic, it's courageous, it's determination, it's all the things, it's confidence, it's building friendships, it's that sort of stuff, rather than I'm going to run around and bleed on people and drink a bunch of beer.
I think the thing for me, and it's kind of not an outsider, but an outsider, the perception that's out there is that that's what we are. We are a brutal, tough sport. And that's what stops people coming in to see what it's really about. And that's only one aspect. Like, I think back to when I was a kid, my mother stopped going to my games when I was 10. She's like, nope, I'm getting injured, I'm going to get hurt. It's like, she doesn't want to be seeing that. It's like, but that's just a perception. And right now, our perception is that it's a tough, rough sport. It is, no doubt. But what Barb was saying, what Scotty said, what rugby is for me is the bigger picture. What, like on one of the sheets that you had and what Nick wrote down is join a rugby community. Not join the community. A rugby community is a different community. It is more holistic. It is more everything else. So the problem is how do we get people in the door to then realize what the sport is, rather than that first thing of, oh shit, I'm going to get hurt. This is just about this brutal getting hit. Whereas for some of us, like I remember growing up being a Munster boy and watching Munster going, and you're going to get hit. You're going to go through the dirt. You're going to go through all of these things. And that was class. Love that. But if we think about the way the current society that we live in, it's a more timid, that's my nice word, soft community. And parents are a lot more, and I have one half of my house that is a lot more, yeah, I was going to say conservative, overbearing. I'll be shot and sleeping here tonight. But in that way of how we do it. But it's, yeah, so we have to be mindful of how do we open the door, because it's not just that. It is that, but not just that. A rugby community is different.
Yeah, we know.
Physical. Oh, sorry, right, the online. They're not even. I was just saying that because of the brutality of the sport and the power game, because it's so physical, it's intense and physical, and you have to have courage to play, because you could get injured. Right? That's the reality. But those values are in place because of the realities of the sport, that we have to look out for each other, that we could take advantage and really hurt each other, but we don't. And that's why we say that even though Nick played for Burlington, if someone were to ask me about Nick, I'd say I played rugby with Nick. Like, he was on the other team, but I played with him because we're both responsible for each other's safety. And because of the nature of the sport, the other values have grown. So I agree with Rob that we need to figure out how to embrace that physicality and explain that that's how these amazing values have evolved. And maybe brutality wasn't the right word. Sorry, Barbara. But it used to be. And it was fun.
That's the problem, I think, though, is that the external view of rugby is that it's a brutal, violent sport. We know that it can be physical and intense without being brutal and violent, but we need to share the parts that they don't see, that they don't understand about rugby until you're in it, right? And you live those values.
I just kind of want to expand on your comment about this being about courage. Kind of previous to that, I mentioned how we need to figure out how do we make these actions and these plans to grow the club. And I like the word that you used, is we need courage we're building not just physically strong people, we're building mentally resilient people. We're building strong character. We're building, all of these values and these ethics. We need to lead our clubs in those values, and not just as a personal development, as a family development, as an organization development. And I just really like that you use the word courage in that. And I think that we need to be courageous, and we need to kind of start breaking some boundaries. Like you say, we're in a timid social atmosphere at the moment. I think we need some groundbreaking, courageous steps.
Yeah, I just would say, like, having to overcome this stigma or this perception of this negative perception around the sport's violence and dangers, yes, we have to overcome that. We have to overcome that while including and being proud of the good things. We tend to not do that. We tend to only talk about the other ways around it. So that's my only point. It's just we have to figure out the language to be still proud of what we are and include all these other things, but we can't skirt around the fact that, you know, the realities of our sport and in a positive light, right?
No, it's a very valid point. Absolutely. But it's trying to, how do we figure the two things and how to fit them together, which is really that kind of key aspect. Anybody online want to chime in?
All the chatterboxes in there, right?
They're just sitting there with a pint in their hand. Scotty, you know what?
Thoughts and reflections? I see a camera came on. Someone want to share?
No, I'm just, you guys are doing a great job of mentioning everything, so that's why we're not adding anything to it.
Just give all the credit. out.
Agreed. Agreed.
I agree with Karen.
Yeah, it's kind of one of, I kind of laugh when you're saying that, because when my 3-year-old picked up a ball for the first time and he got the ball under the left arm, he handed off his 7-year-old sister. And I had to, of course, say, oh, you shouldn't do that. With the proudest part of me was like, oh, yeah, go on. You know, it's like, how do you get the balance? How do you get the balance? But it is an interesting one.
Only tackle your parents.
Oh, the father, yeah. But it's a similar line to what you were saying actually in the retention conversation earlier about the non-contact later on. So when we're talking about the non-contact stream, like I look at it from having conversations with parents, usually in the schoolyard, that there's very little, I'm not sure about you, for adults to do anymore. All the time we're doing kid stuff. We're on the side, we're very little activities and social activities for adults to do. So when we look at some of that non-contact stuff, for me, having had a fat bastard prop stand on my back when I was 19 and can't do much anymore, that's where I would love to be able to get back into playing. So that gives an opportunity for us. And then if I'm going, you can be sure the kids are coming. So it's kind of one of those sales angles. And how do we sell it, but yet grow it, and kind of got to maneuver right the way around it.
I think if the touch or non-contact is positioned as, or at least started at club level as a way of retaining kids who are otherwise going to leave the sport and leave the club altogether. So they might go back to soccer, or they might go back to something that doesn't have hitting. And just keep them in the club atmosphere as a social member, or just keep them involved, and they'll see their friends going off and playing, and then they'll get more confident in their body, or they'll grow a little bit because the kid maybe hits their growth spurt late, and so then they're ready to try. But if there's nothing to keep them at the club, then they'll just forget that rugby was even an option, right? They'll go try something else. So, right, exactly. And so that nuance of like, yes, we're an aggressive sport, but a lot of kids are looking for that, and they keep getting red carded in soccer because, they just are naturally aggressive, and there's no other place for them. So there's room for that in marketing as well. But I think for the non-contact as an option, it should be more of a retention within the club at first, and then for the seniors, it can be like a lifetime track. Yeah.
I think kind of to that idea, but with a different spin, I think part of growing the retention in younger is teaching them real rugby sooner. If you get kids, like we started in Brantford a U4 program this year, if you're a parent watching flag rugby from U4 to U10, you're going to drive over yourself in the car. Like, that's painful. And let's be honest, come on, we've all seen it. It's horrible. So if you're a kid that's competitive, by U6, you're done. You're done with the festivals, you're done with the chasing the fast kid, you're done with that. And then all of a sudden we go from U10 to U12, and not only do you change the sport, now the big kid can smoke you. So it's figuring out a progression in there where we start to teach these kids what rugby actually is sooner. Because there's a lot of kids in our club that want to play up in U12. They don't want to be hit yet, but they're done with flag rugby because they've been playing for so long. They need to see an opportunity to play the real sport, learn how to play rugby, whether it's U8 or U10, however we transition the game. So sooner these kids are learning because that's what makes you fall in love with the sport. Flag rugby is great, but at that age, it's not rugby. It's soccer carrying a ball, right? It's when they get into U12, when they get into U14, that they understand the essence of the game, the movement of the game, how it flows, and all the cool intricacies that all pull us into the game. That's what makes people fall in love with it, not chasing around the fast kid pulling this flag. So the sooner we get kids into that level of rugby and understanding all the cool nuances of the game, then those kids are more willing to get hit and take the intensity and take that stuff, because they've fallen in love with the sport and understand what the sport is, not just all that happening in 1 year.
I have two questions. One is kind of tangent to the other and not necessarily player related. But the first one is we have a lot of teacher support, all right? High school teacher predominantly, post-secondary support. How do we get rugby into the elementary school system? We have soccer, we have basketball, we have volleyball, we have track and field, those kinds of things. Because of the lack of equipment necessity to have a rugby game, how do we get a rugby league into elementary school systems? That's my first question. Pardon? Oh, sorry. Second question is, and this is not player introduction or retention, how do we get younger people willing to referee the younger games? How do you get a teenager to referee the kids' games and that kind of thing, so that they don't want to play the game? Maybe they're not interested in contact. Maybe it's the type of kid who isn't super into contact, but they can still learn and they can still be around the rugby community. They're not exiled, but they can learn about the value of refereeing. And on that spin again, I'm sorry, I'm just like word vomiting at this point, is what do other sports do for referee retention when it comes to like referee abuse and that kind of thing? Like I don't know. Like what do hockey referees do? Is it because they can't hear it? Because they have a helmet on, they can't hear what's going on? But right? Are they? Okay, I didn't know if it was
it's bad
like
everywhere, I think. Yeah.
multi-sport crisis, or if it was kind of a contact. Okay.
Well, I was going to say, we've got a few people in the room who have flag leagues happening in their elementary schools now, so I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that directly.
Yeah, yeah, that is a whole other session. But for Cole's notes anyways, the biggest thing that we found was like, obviously have those teacher contacts, but what you're really looking to get is kind of like that elementary school board lead phys ed kind of person. So we've been very lucky in the Halton region. Before this person took over, we basically got zero traction. We approached them. They never wanted to hear. They didn't want to talk rugby. This new person took over the position, and she was more than accepting. She was excited about it. She wanted the program. So we went in there, teamed up with Oakville in the Halton region. So we got into the elementary schools in the Halton region. And having her as the contact, she would blast out to all the teachers. So she would send it all out. We worked with Rugby Ontario and Rugby Canada and did kind of like a teacher's workshop. So just utilizing everything that's already out there, right? Like, and same with Rob. Rob's been into a lot of the elementary schools. The rookie rugby program that's out there, there's a lot of information that's already out there for teachers. So it's a great resource that, they're not going to be aware of. The other thing was to get the equipment, which is easy to do, but we are even going to reach out to the schools in January to make sure that if they're interested, to go out and purchase a rookie rugby kit and then have that involved. And then we had the teachers run like a 4 to 6 week intro to rugby, and we host at our club, and they bus the kids in, and we do a little mini elementary school flag tournament. So we have like 200 to 300 kids that are playing rugby, and it's been great.
And Burlington's been great partners on that. They do a lot of the heavy lifting, but from the school board's perspective, what's in it for them is, they see us as rep teams, right? Like, so in their mind, the local community club is the representative club locally. So their challenge is you get to grade 9 or grade 10 and you have these rep kids who've been playing since they were 6 years old. They have pass catch, they can tackle. And then they're being introduced to a whole bunch of kids who have never seen rugby or touched rugby, and there's a safety issue. So from the school board's perspective, they're saying, you know what, we need to introduce rugby earlier, because the reality is it's still in our school systems at the high school level, and it's a risk mitigation for them. It allows them to introduce it to a whole bunch of kids. So the teachers aren't necessarily spending that much time on this is how you pass a ball backwards in grade 9. It's more safety. You know, how do you tackle properly? How do you ruck properly? How do you scrummage properly? And so they're finding it really helpful from a risk standpoint as well.
Is it on? You guys aren't going into the school yourself. I talk loud anyways. You are giving the teachers the tools to teach the sport.
Yes, and then we
okay.
also, we're a resource for them if they require
Okay.
additional help. We'll
Right.
we'll send some people out to the schools. We did use our summer intern for that.
Right.
So we had them do the early start in April. So May, June, they were basically going into the schools, helping those teachers run those programs. And we even did a couple like 3-day clinics at some schools that were really interested and had good buy-in.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, and then we host the festival. So the schools bus the kids to our rugby field. We did one in Burlington, and then 2 weeks later, we did another one in Oakville. So it was a good way to cover different schools.
And if this is something that clubs want to integrate into their growth strategy, really that it's this June for the following June, or it's this coming September for the following June, because the teachers really have their programming in place for the year. So be realistic in terms of how long it would take to implement. So we're into it now, but the first it took a long time for us to be able to actually train people, and then they start applying it.
We'll get some more of this in a session virtually and get Burlington and Oakville involved. Somebody's online that wants to talk?
Yeah, just to touch base on the interns, we did something similar in Caledon where we had our intern, along with a couple of other coaches we trained up in the rookie NCCP Rookie Rugby Clinic, go around some of the feeder schools up in Caledon to run the program with the phys ed leads. But with that said, now this past year that the coaching for rookie rugby has kind of seen a bit of a change where it was online curriculum that was available to anybody, any school, any teacher, now requiring NCCP level training. Would you say that is going to create some barriers for some schools, because now they've got to invest time, money, and maybe teachers need to spend the time to take the course? That's something I'm thinking that we may be putting barriers up with what that weren't there before.
Mike, I can clarify that the rookie rugby course is not for school delivery. It would obviously help them, but it's not required by any means for school delivery. Anybody can go in and deliver in schools. We don't really want anybody going in and delivering in schools, but you don't need any qualification.
So if the schools want to continue to run rookie rugby within their school, they don't need to be NCCP trained in rookie rugby?
They do not. That would be only
We
if you
do.
run through Rugby Ontario, Rugby Canada. The schools are separate.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Okay.
Clarify. Yeah. So yeah, because they're not through us. For us, if you're running a minor program, you need to have a rookie rugby or level 1 qualified coach. Rob, did you
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry. I'll just add a quick point here. I think my perception of the schools right now is there's quite a bit of demand. Teachers are struggling with phys ed ideas right now. They're struggling with getting their kids active, and many teachers are not coaches, so they're looking for ideas. The challenge is getting people trained that can go in there and support them, and getting them equipment. If you can cover those two things off, you'll have no issue with getting into elementary schools.
Yeah, so my club, Barhaven Scottish, for the last, couldn't tell you how many summers, we use the Ontario Summer Jobs program internship to get that intern to do the rookie rugby in the, not primary, in middle schools. And so they're contacting the schools to get in there, and as Rob said, like help the teachers deliver that, and then the teachers then have the ability to take it on after the session. But the intern goes in and does the initial sessions and then is kind of like training the teachers to take it on, bring the equipment. So the club pays for the equipment and then we leave it with the school.
Okay, so because we're coming up on 4 o'clock here, our next steps, in our last few minutes here, if anybody wants to share really quickly your biggest takeaway from today or kind of what you will do, where we go from here, whether that's you, what you want us to do, what you'd like to see in the club development series moving forward, you got like 5 words each if you want to share something. So boil it down. What's the takeaway?
Or you can write it on the Post-it notes and put it on the wall.
We also have an exit survey we'll pull up in a sec.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I thought you were ahead of me. No, so from Rugby Ontario, some of the biggest things are where there's economies of scale and you've got 67 clubs all looking for the same thing, we ask the professional staff to start helping us on those things. So it could be anything from ONCA compliant constitutions. It could be coach cards for minor rugby, U6s, and a full curriculum that you get when you do your NCCP1. It could be the one calendar that lays out all the education and training for the year as a draft, or at least to get us started, and the blackout weekends and all those things that we need. Last but not least, best practices and a repository for tools that other people can do so that we don't have people like Barb who have a 2-pager on handout for parents for rugby that everybody could use. We just credit her for it.
I think the biggest takeaway for me today is just that there's a lot of shared frustrations or sentiments or themes within all of our clubs. So I think it's energizing to know that like we're all ready to fix this together, right? And to take steps forward. So it was nice to see, yeah, some of the sentiments that I have about my club is reflected in this room. So.
Anybody else?
I'm excited to reach out to other clubs to help grow together. Just saying. We all have the same idea. I think that we could be reaching out to other local clubs and say, I'm trying to work on this. Let's work on this together.
Anybody online? No? Okay. Jocelyn?
Last pieces? Okay, Michael, next slide. So there you go, QR code and the link for the exit survey. So any of those longer thoughts that you want to share, it's not meant to be long, I promise. Just, did you enjoy it? Would you come again? What should we do more of? What should we do less of? What's your next step, basically? We are doing more, as we've said, so please send us feedback and please continue to share this with everybody that you know, because as we've seen, the more voices, the more representation we have, the more we can learn from each other and the better this discussion is going to be. So keep bringing everybody out. Other than that, thank you so much for coming, and thanks to everyone on Zoom for sticking with us as well.
Have a good afternoon, and hopefully we'll see some of you tonight. Thank you.